Welcome to the Solar Coaster, a renewable energy themed talk show right here in lovely Maui County.
You good? 3, 2, 1. Aloha, welcome to the Solar Coaster live show RE Plus 2022 in Anaheim. It's been a few years since we got together. We're here with Brian Patterson of Emerge Alliance. This is a pretty interesting fellow. Oh, and there's my co-host Jason Verkart too. You want to say hi, Jay?
I am here, but we've talked to Brian a number of times over the years. Always fascinating conversations. Love to hear what you're up to every single time.
Thank you.
RE Plus 2022 Day 2. Here we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're at the Grid Edge Theater. What's going on, Brian?
Well, right behind me is, for a first really, a mock-up of an all DC home. Now we've been using DC more and more because the native solar panels and batteries and all that are natively DC.
Right.
But we haven't really put the whole ball of wax together in a DC coupled and DC delivered power system.
Yeah.
So what we're showing is a little bit of leading edge. There are some things going on that are piloting what you see here, but we figured we'd bring it to the trade show and let people kick the tires and really see what's going on.
Nice.
So right behind us, of course, are appliances, which look like normal appliances, and my grandkids over here did some
That made it
artwork
look
for
so
us.
real.
It's dinged up a little on the bottom.
It's a real refrigerator. If you stand over here, it's pretty cold in
It's
there.
actually cold. They have it stocked up
And
with
we
water.
have, for the first time, sort of a little bit as a joke, but this is for the first time DC chilled water.
Nice.
Very rare water. Not that the water's rare, but
premium.
chilling of with
Yeah.
DC power is pretty
Absolutely
rare.
fantastic.
So this system not only delivers DC to all these appliances, and you see a washer and dryer here and home entertainment, and over there you'll see the HVAC. Well, there's a condenser actually for it.
Right.
That's one of the newest, latest electric heat pumps.
Right.
And as you know, people are looking to go to electric heat pumps to save energy and get off the fossil fuel route. The actual air handle unit is over there. But whether it's ducted or a mini split, it's you need power for it. So
Yeah,
we want to go from fossil fuel to electricity. So these are the typical things that you see in a home. Today they're AC, and if you're going to power with AC, but inside they're really DC, like all these appliances, pretty state of the art, or DC inside, you have to do conversions. And so that's one advantage of going to DC. There are really more advantages though, because of the way you can handle DC in the entire system, including in your neighborhood and all the way up to the community level.
Right.
So sort of creating virtual power plants and transactive grids that are semi-autonomously controlled and all this good stuff. Because it's more like the internet than it is like the old horse and buggy kind of grid stuff.
Absolutely, and I know there's a big conversation waiting to happen here, but just in terms of the fundamentals, right? Let's say that you're my mom or you're a friend of ours and you're watching, and they go, well, why is it relevant to have a DC appliance, or why is it relevant to have a DC house? And then of course we just installed some DC coupled solar plus battery systems back in Maui in our home, so we're thinking in DC, and maybe just the fundamentals.
It makes it easier to give a customer, person, or what have you, a system that is not only versatile and what I call easily articulated, because we're using electricity to do a lot more things.
Sure.
We're heading towards an augmented reality kind of world where you want your home to accommodate you, not you accommodating the home. So a lot more automation, controls, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So we want something that's pretty versatile, and DC power is the same power that's used by semiconductors. So we don't have to, every device today that takes in AC power has to first convert that. So that's extra equipment, extra size, extra weight on all those devices. You know, and we even call it a brick, the converter you often have to put for your phone and your computer, right?
Yeah, he calls them those too.
Then the notion that you're calling it a brick suggests that it's size and weight.
So am I right in maybe...
Yeah, it's not a nice term.
It's not a nice term, no. Not really complimentary.
Is it correct to say that, as, let's say, society's progressed and we've moved to having all of these silicon-based devices in our homes, that it it would benefit us to power them directly with DC because they're effectively DC consumptive devices, right?
Yes,
I mean, that's what's
exactly.
going on.
So you're picking up some efficiency right away, by not
Right.
having to convert.
Right.
And you're also making it then possible to directly use, for example, solar panels that are on your roof,
Right.
and not have to go and convert it to, from DC to AC and then back to DC
And that's
again.
kind of the relationship, right? We're now getting solar on roof.
Right.
Those are DC,
Those are DC.
energy generating devices.
There's no other way to run those. They
Right,
do operate
and then
DC
we can,
only.
rather than invert, rectify, and there's loss.
Right.
Now we're saying, hey, let's take that energy right off of our roof,
Right.
photon to electron,
Yep.
and then bring it down and
Right.
consume it in the device. And that's
Right.
kind of the value proposition
Right.
of a DC home, right?
Right, and we could always feed it back to the utility if we want, if we have extra power, and we'll just give them pure sine wave AC if they want it, because we would have to, if they put it back in the grid, get it to AC then.
Right.
Instead of the AC going to DC, we go DC to AC.
Right.
But we're going to give them pure power back, really clean power, and we can manage it, because if they're not ready for it, we have batteries to hold on
Right.
to it for a while, and
Sure.
so we can kind of negotiate it in a way, either in time or in finance.
It's pretty wild, it occurs to me, just the math of the situation, because we're creating more and more generating capacity with all these advances in solar,
Yep.
we're consuming less and less energy, even in current AC appliances in our home,
Right,
right?
right.
We have this kind of, one friend of ours, we move a little bit to the left, please.
Sure.
One friend of ours just called it the bifurcation of energy, right? Maybe I forget who that was, but
Right.
we have these kind of heavy loads in one area of the home, and the rest is all this kind of, I think you had said, was it a flourishing garden of smart devices? That was
Right,
your,
right,
that's your
right.
Yeah,
quote.
that was you.
Yeah.
That was your quote, and we love that quote. We said it a couple times since. So you have, this changing consumptive patterns in our homes, but so much more power and so much less consumption. So now we have the opportunity maybe for the electrification of transport. That's got to be a key piece of this puzzle too, right?
Yeah, I kind of measure that progress, or if you want to call it, or evolution, by how many of my outlets in the home, the number of outlets in the home are actually regulated by the National Electrical Code and all that. Do you have to have so many outlets per room?
Yeah,
And all that, but they're AC outlets, right? How many of those outlets do I have to put a power strip on so I can put all the plugs of my
I
little
know, I'm so
guys?
tired of that. Jeez.
Yeah, I have more power strips now in my home. I tend to be a gadget person anyway, so I'm a little bit on the leading edge of that. But almost every room of mine has at least one, if not two, of those power strips now, because
Right.
I have so many gadgets and things that I need to plug in.
Right.
So that'll all go away, because now we can plug in directly and get low voltage DC right at the wall, whether it's USB PD, which is a new standard to power your computer and charge your phone and all that. And if you have a USB-C connector, you just plug right into that, and it'll be on the wall outlet. Or the old USB, the USB-A, and so on.
And USB for people because people are familiar with USB. USB-A,
Yep.
B, C, right? Those are the three that
We
Yeah.
use the one you see on the back of the
It's
printer,
the one-
That's
where
it.
nobody uses it.
Right. But that's DC energy, right?
Yeah,
That's all DC, yeah.
So that's
all
DC in our homes
so A and,
presently.
B, A and B
DC.
are going to be 5 volts. C has some interesting.
Yeah, C
high
can
power
do multiple
specifications.
voltages. It kind of does a
They
handshake.
negotiate, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
it kind of asks the device, what voltage would you like,
Right. And what's lightning? Just how does lightning fit into Thunderbolt?
Lightning is more about the data rate that
Right.
goes along with that, so it has power, but the
Right.
power is not the lightning part.
I see.
Hopefully, you
Okay.
don't want
Yeah, let's
want
not do
really
that.
lightning when you're talking about power, but it's the speed of the data,
Gotcha.
the data rate.
Gotcha.
And USB, of course, now is pretty fast too. So. There's a lot going on there, and as we go through the 5G and 10G evolution, the data rates are just going to keep zooming. The neat thing, though, that you mentioned was that as we get more efficient at using energy, we use more of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of a reverse equation. In other words, you say, well, if I don't need the energy there, if I've saved it over here, I can use it over there, a new thing, So we're still going to have a very energy hungry world.
Right.
More so.
More so. As a developed world conserves some energy over here through efficiency, it wants to reapply it to something else to be more productive, right?
Right.
In the developing world, it's really based on population growth and the fact that at least half the world has either limited or no access to electricity.
Right.
So there's a big desire to fill that. So it is a very energy hungry world. We're just trying to get to a form of energy that doesn't leave a lot to put in the garbage, so to speak.
I thought that was that language was interesting. You just said it's like you want to apply that. Now we've got these efficiencies, we've got this great generation capacity. We want to apply, make it apply to new work, right? New things.
Yeah.
We're just talking about that.
Yeah.
So like electric vehicles, you mentioned electric vehicle charging. We now have high level 2, 11.5, 48 amp kind of territory electric chargers in our homes, but we could conceivably move to DC in our homes, right?
Yeah, and if you move to DC, you can, generally we're going to be able to charge faster, as you probably know with level 3. Now level 3 DC charging is very power intense. So we think that there's going to be what I call medium speed charging at home.
Right.
If we can get the charging at home that's like an hour or 2,
Right.
it's a pretty comfortable speed.
Oh, yeah.
Rather than wait 8 or 10 or 12 hours.
Like
that
over
makes
dinner
people
as
nervous.
opposed to overnight.
Absolutely. And you know, in 15 minutes at that rate, you'll have enough if you need to get to the hospital or whatever, you know, the emergency
Right.
stuff. But to charge your car fully in a couple of hours or less is a neat thing to have at home.
And we're talking, I think you had told me yesterday, in like the 30 kW range, something like that, right?
Yeah, because you go to the commercial rates, they're headed for 50 kW and up.
Right.
You know, to get down to that 15-minute charge at the service station.
Right.
Because it's about the amount of time it takes to pour a cup of coffee and put some cream in and stir it, right?
Jay, now people may be thinking about this in some, like this is a grand philosophical kind of concept and when will it ever reach us, but you actually walked us through how it works in a home, like what it takes to change a certain, like say, a line of circuits for our kitchen, for example, into DC appliances.
I always say the dirty secret is that the electrons, those guys that actually do the work, they don't know whether they're AC or DC. You see, so it doesn't matter. They all travel down wires.
Yep.
And actually, the wire size and all that, if you can regulate the voltage, which we can now do through power electronics, we can use exactly the same wires we were using for AC. So we don't have to tear the house apart to convert it over to DC.
This is a remarkable part of the conversation because we're already in the world of bringing in load control panels. Right. And there's 4 or 5 major load control panel companies out here. We're going to be seeing some of them today. We have a load control panel in our home at the moment, dynamic control of individual circuits. So now if you're in that process, you could just basically put in a DC load control panel,
exactly.
right?
Yeah. Pretty much what you do is, if you're transitioning as opposed to a new build, you'd put in a sub panel, call it a DC sub panel, although maybe eventually it'll be a combined panel, but let's say it's a separate panel. And you would take the wire that's now terminating in your AC box and you just move it over to the DC.
Yeah.
And then you change the outlet to match the DC outlet as opposed to an AC outlet.
Right.
So most of things like your dishwasher and your dryer washer and all those big appliances have dedicated lines back to that panel, your AC panel box. So as you go to DC, you just switch the wires over.
Right. And the next question, of course, would be how do you, people might say, well, I have AC appliances. How am I going to use DC?
Sure.
But you mentioned there's kind of a what do you call it again? Was it transitional, what do you call it? Transitional adoption? What was the term you used?
Yeah, transformative adoption.
Transformative adoption.
We're trying to, what the appliance people don't want to have, you know, a whole set of appliances that are AC and that they have to service and store and warehouse and all that, and a whole set that are DC. So it's much simpler because inside they're all DC already. So all we have to do is say, can you do a power supply, which is that first thing that the power goes into, and have it so that if it's an AC house, let's call it, it'll go into that AC side of that power supply. If it's DC, it just goes around the rectifier that's you're normally changing the AC to DC. Just goes around it, essentially around that device and right into the device. So the dual input capability. So when you go to buy an appliance in the future, and hopefully in the very near future, you would just tell the store people that are selling you the appliance. Today they're going to ask you, do you want a 120 service or a 240 AC service, right? Those are the two choices you get. They would just say, do you want a 120, a 240, or a 350 DC? And that would be it. You wouldn't have to make any other decision. Most consumers don't even really understand the difference between 120 and 240, and they probably won't have to understand the difference between those two and 350 DC.
Right.
And that'll all be taken care of by how the house is wired and so on.
So there's a lot of great value propositions that I see here, and Jay, jump in at any time. But I want to, like, what if you're a homeowner going, why would I want DC? What's the simple answer?
It's like, why do you want a computer? It's going to give you so much more capability eventually with all new devices and resiliency. What scares most people now about our electrical situation, besides maybe the economic side where we see because of fossil fuels the price going up, or because of the fossil fuel emissions that we have a climate issue. If we even put those two biggies aside, the next one is what happens when the power goes out? So resiliency is a big issue. If you want to prevent a resiliency problem, because now if you don't have a way of storing energy to cover you during that resiliency time, during that outage time, your power goes out and you're out of the game, right? But to store things, mostly that's going to be DC technology. Batteries are DC, for example. So you're going to get into that. Now I got to charge the battery, I got to go from AC to DC, I lose some power, and then when it comes out of the battery back to my system, I got to go the other way, so I'm losing value to that battery. If it's all DC, it just goes in and out.
Yeah.
There's always some
Well, and by the time you do it, solar, if you have an AC coupled battery, it's the worst, because then you're going DC, AC, you're losing percentage. I mean, it ends up in tens of percents in slot, and we don't have enough roof space to do it all.
For the average consumer, though, they probably won't appreciate all of that nuance, and I call it nuance to them. It's big to the people that are making equipment and building power systems. They're just going to get better appliances, more reliable, that will continue to run even during power outages.
That's what I was I think I was trying to walk towards. What's the impact on the appliances themselves? Are they performing better? Do they have better longevity? Are there any impacts like that I'm kind of maybe thinking might be there?
I was actually talking to the HVAC guy that's in this system, happens to be Train, they're a good company.
Right.
And he was telling me about the fact that the power conversion and filtering and everything that they have to do to take an AC and make it into a good DC is more components, more cost, right? Which always adds an additional point of failure. As the grid power gets more, I'll call it corrupted or dirty, because people coming on and off and all these events going on.
Oh, right.
And people, that impact on the individual appliances is going to increase, which means a lot of times you're going to blow out the front end of the appliance just because of the quality of power coming off the grid. Okay. In order to avoid that, there's going to have to be tremendous investment in the grid to do all that filtering up front, which is getting harder and harder to do, because if all of a sudden you come home and you have a car that you want to charge and you plug it in, all your neighbors are going to see a little bit of a dip and maybe a frequency shift and things like that, and your appliance is taking that hit.
I see.
Okay, so you're going to improve the reliability of individual devices, lower the cost of them, making them more robust, and so on and so forth.
I see.
Now, how easily that is for the consumer to understand all that, but certainly people know that when there's a lightning storm and things like that, that occasionally they tell you, well, pull the plugs out of the wall because you might ruin your stereo, your TV, or something like that. Well, think of that in similar terms. If you have transients that are coming from your power lines and things like that, that is always banging against your appliance, potentially affecting that front end conversion electronics there.
That's a great explanation. Thank you for that. And then I know that in that transformative move, right, it's possible to think of maybe like a room, for example, like kitchen.
Yep.
So because kitchens get updated, right? So every 5-10 years or so, you go, hey, I've kind of had it with this old appliance.
Yeah.
So if someone's at that moment in time and they go, maybe I want to give this a shot. I've got solar. I've got a DC battery. Maybe I want to do this, right? Is that coming down the road? I know these are LG appliances, right?
Yeah, we're talking to the appliance people about this transformative transition so that they can start selling equipment that can take either AC or DC. You mentioned one scenario where you have solar already and batteries and you just want to now, instead of converting it and all that, you want to use it directly and pick up some efficiency and get better power. But what about the person who has their hot water heater or their heat pump, dies on them and they need a new one, but they haven't put solar yet on their house,
right?
Or maybe they can't afford solar yet or something for some reason, but they have to buy that appliance. They don't have a choice of buying AC, DC appliance because there's no DC, right?
Yeah.
So they buy an appliance that's AC. 2 years later, maybe they're in the job, they get a bonus, or they, whatever, now they can afford solar. Oh, but all my stuff is still AC, so now I can't take advantage even though I'm willing to invest in the AC, or the solar and the battery and so on. So it puts you in a hard spot because now you bought a new piece of equipment that's going to have to last 10 or 15, 20 years, but I can't take advantage of the efficiency that I'd gain if I went to DC because it's only an AC appliance. So that's why we're telling the appliance people, say we need the dual input.
I see.
So that homeowner can say, oh, I'm ready to put solar on my house, and or whatever, maybe it's a fuel cell or whatever they're going to do. But all I have to do now, my appliances can just switch. I don't have to throw them out.
I see.
Yeah.
And it can be
perfect
as
example
simple
is
as
in this. Sorry, just one second, Jason. In this convention center, you look up there and what do you see? Fluorescent lights, right?
Right.
Do you know why they're fluorescent and not LEDs?
Because you told me yesterday, but you probably want to say it again.
Because at the time that we started looking at energy efficiency, the type of fluorescent up there, compact fluorescent and narrow tube fluorescent, was more efficient than the older version, right?
Right.
And the AC appliances are getting more efficient in their conversion on. But they're stuck now because they probably have to write off that investment over 15 or 20, or in the case of buildings, sometimes as much as 29 years, based on tax reasons. So they can't afford to switch over to the latest technology.
Right.
If those were dual input devices, they'd be able to switch over. And if you notice on this convention center, there's a tremendous solar array up here.
Right.
And so
if
they're
the housing itself was dual, they could go to the other kind. Right.
Right. So they got stuck on the investment. That's what we don't want to do to people.
I see. We're trying to learn from past mistakes.
That's an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
When we talk about stranded assets, we
it.
generally think about large-scale power plants and stuff like that. We're looking at it right here.
What about that computer that doesn't, my old computer doesn't have an HDMI port or a lightning plug or whatever.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be in that situation. You want to have equipment that has some sort of technological longevity.
So if I may, we just talked quite a bit about the home, about EV charging, about some of the strategies for the appliances, and then of course solar and battery and that whole line of thinking. But if we extend it out to the utility, or if we think about whole communities, I know Block Energy here and Amera Technologies are doing really remarkable things with community development and like a DC backbone, can I call it that?
So now we take, if you've seen one microgrid, even if it's a DC microgrid, you've seen one microgrid. We know, and some people may even know, Metcalfe's law, which is generally applied to computing. If you have a personal computer and you don't connect it to the internet, it has a fraction of the value than if you can connect it to the internet and get all the features of
I see the parallel.
text and email and all the rest of it. If you think of that in power terms, if you have your own power system in your home, but you don't connect it to your neighbors and everybody else that has similar power systems, you have a fraction of the value of that microgrid of having done that work. If you connect it all together, you can now make the whole community or your whole neighborhood much more robust. You don't have to have enormous batteries. You need to share batteries, and you may even have supplemental batteries at the community level.
Yeah.
Or under emergency conditions, most businesses will not operate, so then they'll prioritize the power that's there through storage and everything to be used in the communities and emergency service buildings, healthcare services, and so on. So from a community sense now, you can manage the power much differently than you would if you didn't have storage that is tied together in a mesh network like that.
So kind of unleashing the potential and monetizing that in a sense, or providing that value out there to everyone.
Just leveraging all the value inherent.
Exactly.
We're seeing that in Hawaii right now. I mean, just in terms of the grid services, we're talking to Brad yesterday of Swell and the battery bonus program. So we have all these things happening in Hawaii where they're trying to gain access to those and primarily storage assets. But that's kind of in its early stages, and they're having there's some challenges in understanding how that applies and where the value is.
And while you want some storage at that, I'll call it at the utility level, the macro level, you have to remember that part of our resiliency issue is that if we put our production assets, in this case storage, at the central level, so to speak, if you have lines down conditions or forest fire conditions like they do in the California and all, you still can't get to that
Yeah.
battery.
Yeah.
Now, this seems to be
Doesn't
a key piece of it, right, Jay? It's
Yeah.
like the conversation. I think we had this conversation earlier, but I keep coming back to this idea. We want you to talk about the house and the community and the overall grid. Now, let's say we're really ramping up our loads at the grid edge. At
Right,
that stage,
that's where the loads are.
right? So we need that productive and storage and sharing capacity at the grid edge.
right.
Otherwise, our transmission is the problem, right?
Right.
That's
Because
what I've been
those
talking
things,
about
that's
before.
still, I'm going to
Yeah.
use Doug's,
Yeah.
we still got dead trees, copper wire,
Yeah.
right? So that's not really going to work too well.
And it's not too hard to understand if you look at what happened with data and information, right? In the beginning, when computers were first invented and all that, they were the big computers insurance companies had, the government
Yeah,
had, and all that.
mainframe.
They put some networks together and discovered that most of the communication on those started to be local communication, not big amounts of data.
Yeah.
And today, we're at that time, 90% of everything that was in the information system was from central creation and generated at a central point. Today, with our digital phones and photographs that we take, we take 1,000 pictures now of everything. Oh, the dog's sleeping, take a picture of it. All that data now, about 80 to 90% of it is at the edge of the information network, right?
Yeah.
Same thing is true of power. Right now, most of the power we produce is central, right? But we did that for valid reasons before. We didn't want those noisy, smelly power plants near my home.
Right.
And
that
so
was the
on.
technology of the
Right.
day.
And if you did DC, we didn't have the power electronics to be able to do the distribution we're talking about. So today, though, we can produce power close to the use of the power, and it's not going to be smelly and make noise. Right? So
it can live with us.
it can live with us. It can be a part of what we're doing, and that's going to make it much more resilient again and more controllable. So people have more control and autonomy and independence of their own power sphere, I'll call it, than they do today.
It's an exciting time, and we definitely are. This is one of the best examples I think I've seen, and we talk
sure.
about this stuff all the time for years, of kind of where it's going and that it's really possible right here, like with these
Yeah.
DC appliances.
And the purpose of the demonstration here is literally that. We want people, even though you can't do this exactly today, you probably can in a few months, and Amera certainly is doing as close as you can get to what we're showing here. But we want to show it so that people know that it's not just some kind of thing that requires a fancy invention or something. This is regular stuff. These are regular appliances, and we just modified a few things. We want people to come and see it working, be able to kind of kick the tires and say, yeah, I want that new, that new way to go.
That's radical. Well, it's been a pleasure. We cover all the ground we wanted to, Jay.
Thank you.
I just want to point out that these are legitimately regular LG appliances. That
As I was saying before, if you open the refrigerator, you can have a very unique commodity right now. Is DC chilled water.
This is real.
This is really a first. It's very rare water.
It's
actually
premium stuff.
The water itself is common, but chilling it was done with a DC refrigerator, so there's not too many of those yet.
Very
but
good.
There you go.
And we'll
That's
get pictures,
awesome.
We'll get pictures of the outlets and other stuff, but I mean, it's just phenomenal to see. We talked about it years ago, having a DC micro, but very much conceptual. This is working.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Awesome.
that's what we've been
Fantastic.
doing year after year at this show, is trying to show what is possible.
Well, it's been a pleasure as always. Brian Patterson, Emerge Alliance, here at RE Plus 2022. Thank you for all the innovation. Thank you for getting this industry forward.
It's a pleasure. It's a
Wealth
pleasure.
of knowledge
Thank you.
and pushing the needle.
Thank
We do
you.
appreciate it.
Thank
All right, there it is. That's
This
a wrap.
is the world that my grandkids are going to inherit. So.
Yes.
Yeah.